it's best to stay in a workable state and communicate in a way that's problem solving, not problem creating. Why are we creating problems when we don't even know these problems exist?
When you're that close, it's very difficult to unwind the whole transaction and start over. There was never a time where being combative with the other side was going to win me that negotiation.
Every time you do that, every time you draw a line, every time you make an ultimatum, every time you create an argument, everybody's anxiety goes up and you're taking goodwill out of the deal.
If you're coming off as someone who's rude or arrogant or whatever, you're likely not going to get the best out of that person. There is areas of gray here that you need to work through to come to the realization that maybe the best decision is this.
But they're like, well, you know, this, and this.
You're dealing with people's lives. Like, this is their home that they're trying to sell and they're entrusting you to do it.
90% of the time, there's a solution, even if you don't know the solution immediately.
People want to do business with people they like. When push comes to shove, you give someone a solution to the problem and you're that close to the finish line, they're likely going to take it. This is exactly why we use professionals.
Yeah.
They are not simple. They get into this situation, they think they know exactly how it's going to play out, and they don't.
Is clear cooperation going away? We already have a Utah-based realtor association that says no more unclear cooperation. Let's talk about it. By the way, make sure you like and subscribe and give us a rating on wherever you listen to our podcast. So thanks for being here. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so clear cooperation. There's been a lot of talk about clear cooperation going away, and I do not get it, why we would want to eliminate it, but I don't also get it, why it would matter if it did go away. So, basically what I'm hearing, and for you guys that don't know what clear cooperation is, let me just give you a brief overview. So clear cooperation works in sync with your local MLS. So it's an NAR rule that works with the MLS. So any sort of affiliation with NAR members requires that house be marketed on the MLS within 1 day of the property being available in the marketplace. So you got 24 hours basically when you list a house to get that thing on the MLS, or if you stick a sign in the yard, you got 24 hours before that thing has to belong on the MLS. And so the idea is that we are sharing that with the marketplace. Now, the only reason that I can think of that people would want to get rid of clear cooperation is so that they could market things in-house and potentially sell them within their own brokerage. However, does that give the listing proper market exposure? And one of the things that I thought of when we were talking about this whole scenario with clear cooperation is one time, back probably 10 years ago, and this is when Zillow's coming on the scene and we're all terrified of Zillow and we're like, oh my gosh, we gotta cut Zillow out somehow. And our brokerage, we're just not going to market on Zillow. So we're going to, make the decision that we're just going to market on the MLS and we're not going to click the whatever it's called to sort of broadcast it to different websites. Well, that caused a firestorm of clients being upset because they wanted their house marketed properly and they wanted to bring the most buyers possible to market or to their home. So that's the only, it's like, well, you can try, but I think sellers are going to be like, no. I want it out there to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's what's going on.
The whole reason for listing a home is to make sure that it has the most market exposure possible. This is why people, in general list when they start out as a for sale by owner, is that they don't have the proper market exposure. So they're like, hey, I'll list it. I'll get it on the MLS. It'll get disseminated to all these other websites. And I'll have more market exposure, which is true. There are some unique situations where maybe you'd want to sell off market. Like there's an issue with the house or something that needs to be covered with the other side in such a way that it's like not a simple transaction. Mm-hmm. But those are few and far between. If you're going to list a house, you want the market exposure. If you want to get top dollar, you need the most eyes on it as humanly possible.
Yeah. And then the other thing was, listings have always been able to be exempt anyway. So you could, if your seller says, hey, I don't want to put this on the MLS, they could. That was always been possible. So I just don't get what all the talk is about.
And that article that we were referring to that we will put in the show notes, they even said that even though that they're saying that you no longer have to list it within one business day, they've never given out a fine for this issue at hand. So they're basically saying this is a non-issue.
So I would welcome in the comments any sort of pushback or maybe a different understanding or a different way to see this, but that's the way that I see it. And whether clear cooperation continues to be enforced or not, I think makes no difference in the real estate market. I think it makes no difference to us as real estate agents. So anyway, it's just another topic that people are using to sort of, get some more news out there, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. But I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to talk about just general cooperation, period, right? Cooperation with real estate agents as we sort of move forward in this new world. And I wanted to just share an experience that I had in the past week. And, I want to, ultimately this, agent on the other side is a great agent, and maybe they were just having a bad day or something, but it was a really interesting interaction because we had an appraisal that came in low, and it came in substantially low. So, it probably within, $20-something thousand too low on a $600,000 property. So it 2% and change, right? So substantial enough for us to kind of go, hey, what's going on here? And so we challenged the appraisal. We were able to get it up $8,000 or $6,000. So we still had about $20,000 to cover. But in this interaction, I kept getting ultimatums from the agent on the other side. And these came through text, but one text and one conversation. And one of the conversations was like via text, like, well, if this appraisal doesn't come in, they're just not going to be able to sell it. And I was like, oh, okay. I said, I'm sure there's a solution. Let's work through this, right? And then the next conversation, he was like, well, they just said, they're going to have to, they told me they're going to have the buyers just pay their agent. The buyers will have to pay you because they just can't afford to do this. And I was able to, get my buyers to come up a little bit over appraised value. And we ended up settling it. We said, hey, this is what we're willing to do. And they ended up signing the counteroffer, and it was fine. But I was just like, what was all the ultimatums about? Right? Why were we drawing lines in the sand? And to me, and like I said, maybe it was a real busy for this guy. Maybe it was a bad weekend. I don't know. But what I can tell you is every time you do that, every time you draw a line, every time you make an ultimatum, every time you create an argument, first of all, everybody's anxiety goes up, and you're taking goodwill out of the deal. It's best to stay in a workable state and communicate in a way that's problem solving, not problem creating. And I guess that's what I took away from that is like, why are we creating problems when we don't even know these problems exist? Right? We have one problem that we need to solve, but this is best solved through optimism and having a positive demeanor, even if it doesn't work in the long run, than being negative and drawing lines in the sand and creating ultimatums. So I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, and I happen to know a lot about this deal since I was representing them from a mortgage perspective. They weren't even that far apart either when you start to take the concessions into account.
Sure.
And furthermore, at this point, that was the last condition remaining was the appraisal. They were clear to close after that. Who's to say that you are better off by canceling this deal or terminating the deal, putting it back on the market, potentially getting another low appraisal, and potentially being back in the same situation again?
Right.
And so that's what people don't realize is like when push comes to shove, you give someone a solution to the problem and you're that close to the finish line, they're likely going to take it.
Sure.
And so for him to assume that his clients were going to be like, hey, I'm done, I'm just going to list it again or do whatever, it is very short-sighted of him. He had no idea what his clients were going to do clearly because they just signed it really quick.
Yeah.
And when you're that close, it's very difficult to unwind the whole transaction and start over with a bunch of unknowns.
Yeah. And I just, I was like, what was that about? And honestly, it gave me some anxiety because I'm like, crap, what are we going to do here? Because we needed to get this deal to closing, but I wanted to also help my clients make a sound financial decision. So just a word to you agents out there, like I realize things get stressful and I realize that you guys get busy, but my gosh, be professional, be courteous, be kind, be complimentary.
It's funny that two people in the same situation kind of walk away with two different experiences or lessons learned, and you just told yours. Mine was more that just like, this is exactly why we use professionals.
Yeah.
Because our client wouldn't have been able to navigate that alone.
Nope.
His client wouldn't have been able to see like kind of the positive sides until we shared with him, like, this is the reason why you might want to consider this deal.
Sure.
And if those two people were working kind of off MLS for sale by owner and buyer unrepresented, they never would have been able to navigate that. And the funny thing is, I just did another deal in Oklahoma. I was mortgage representation for the mortgage perspective there as well. And I had done a deal for this person's dad here in Tennessee. I'm now doing the mortgage for the son in Oklahoma. He's buying the home unrepresented in Oklahoma. They're selling it for sale by owner. Guess who did the entire real estate? I had to get basically my license reactivated and do all the paperwork, me, because they had no idea what they were doing.
Right.
And so, like, it's just one of those things where, people need professionals in these in these transactions. They are not simple. They get into this situation. They think they know exactly how it's going to play out, and they don't.
Yeah, they have no idea, and they're not thinking about all of the variables in the transaction. So they think, everybody thinks it's like, I had the same takeaway. I'm like, this would have never come together if there weren't agents on both sides of this. Never.
It's just very difficult. And it's funny to me that the answer has been to take the agent more and more out of this. It's certainly the buyer's agent for now. That's the kind of the in the crosshairs, so to speak. But it's a bad precedent to set.
But even dealing with the appraiser, even pulling up supporting comps, even all the stuff that we did on the back end to get this thing through, I'm like, this takes professionals.
Yeah.
So you guys that are, if you're worried that your job is going away, it's not, right? This is still a relational industry. It's still a human industry, and it's going to require a level of skill set, professional skill set to get these deals to closing. And so let's just do a hypothetical. Let's just say 50% of agents or 50% of transactions stop using agents. What you're going to see if that were to happen is more busted deals. Can promise you. And then agents gaining back ground. So if you're worried about your job going away, it's not, right? It still requires professional help because these things are complicated.
Yep.
Okay, so, but the other thing that I want to talk about is just negotiation as building your skill set. And we've talked about this a lot because that's one of the things that sort of went away, I think, during sort of the rush of real estate in 21 and 22, and people lost the ability to offer and counteroffer and negotiate. And so it's important for us to talk about in a cooperative setting or while you're cooperating with the other agent is how to negotiate properly. And we'll attach a book list in the show notes, and we have a book list also. If you haven't joined our Agent Bridge private page, please do. And you can get access to the book list there too. But listen, negotiation, it's a skill that you need to learn, and it doesn't start with taking sides. It starts with getting on the same team, especially in a real estate transaction. You don't want to be you want to be on the side of the deal. And most real estate transactions, the variance in purchase price to sell price is typically going to be just 2 to 3%. And that's throwing in everything. That's seller concessions or price or whatever the case may be. Once we get that thing to a comparable price in the neighborhood, your variation is only going to be between 2 and 3%. So we have just a lot of agents kind of coming in trying to play hardball. I don't think that's going to work. You need to get on the same team with the agent on the other side, and you guys be on the side of the deal and bring it together. Because the win for the sellers is they can take their equity and move on. The win for the buyers is they've got a financial instrument that's wealth building. So it's a win for everybody, but you just have to be able to communicate effectively and bring people to the table.
Yeah. In my corporate background, I negotiated several $250+ million deals. And what I can tell you is that there was never a time where being combative with the other side was going to win me that negotiation.
Yeah.
You cannot walk into any negotiation, whether you're buying a car, selling a home, negotiating a big contract or whatever. Being combative is never going to get you the best outcome possible. Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to show some respect to the other side, show your knowledge of the situation, whatever that may be, and come to an agreement that is mutually beneficial. That's how contracts work. And you have to be able to see perspectives that aren't yours.
Yeah.
Use your life lessons to come to an agreement. But being combative and trying to treat the other party like they're not worth as much as you is never going to be the answer.
This will be a reference a few people will get, but you're not the CEO of Axe Capital, right? You're not going to come in like, that's a TV show, right? So you're not going to come in and be combative and have some sort of like, ace up your sleeve that's going to get the deal to the closing table. It's going to come through agreement, objectivity, and through cooperation.
People want to do business with people they like. And so if you're coming off as someone who's rude or arrogant or whatever, you're likely not going to get the best out of that person.
Right. One of the other things is just people getting or taking on the emotions of their buyers or sellers. Don't do that, right? Make sure that you step back from it and be objective.
You're the voice of reason.
You're the voice of reason, okay? But what I can tell you, 90% of the time, there's a solution. Even if you don't know the solution immediately, you still have to keep working the problem. Just keep working the problem. And I didn't know what the solution was going to be on this particular deal, right? Seemed like, to somebody is like, well, this seems maybe insurmountable, right? Because it's a significant gap. But just with a little bit of effort, take some time, work the problem, look for solutions, keep moving it forward, and you'll be amazed. It's like how that solution will begin to reveal itself to you over time.
We even had a similar situation with one of your sellers where they were like, hey, I'm not going to sell at that price. And you and I sat down, you're like, hey, what do you think? And I'm just like, here's what I would say. Like you can take that money right now, put it in the bank, it earns interest, and it's going to work itself out in 6 months. And this guy can go off on his merry way. I mean, this house has been listed for a year now. And sure enough, he did. I mean, that's the situation where you're not thinking clearly when you're sitting there looking at a $200,000 loss. But in reality, if you continue to let it sit, you continue to, pay the property taxes, pay the insurance, do all this, over time, the loss gets bigger and bigger unless you just figure out a way out of it. And that's a problem-solving mentality. Like you can't treat every situation like it's this or that. Like there is areas of gray here that you need to work through to come to the realization that maybe the best decision is this.
Yeah. Can I tell you something that really annoys me that other agents do, right? When we're in kind of a difficult situation, they try to teach me in the point in that negotiation.
So it's like a way to look down on you.
Well, it kind of comes off as condescending. I don't think that they mean it that way. But they're like, well, this, and this, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it comes off as condescending. Don't try to teach in a negotiation. Don't try to teach the other agent. I think problem solving together is a good idea. It's like, hey, what are you thinking on this? How are your clients feeling about it, right? What do you think is a proper solution? One of the things that we've been thinking about is this. But don't come at me with, well,
Yeah, the better way to say that is just like from my perspective, or here's what is working through in my brain. Like this is the way I see it, and that comes across much better than you saying.
And a lot of it is just framing. I mean, it's just the information and then how you convey it. But yes, I don't like being taught. And maybe that's my own ego, I guess. But it just comes off the wrong way. So just have some deference, have some humility, work through the problem solving piece of it together. Again, be on the same team. And the other thing is really don't draw lines in the sand. Keep everybody in play. One of the things that happens a lot in negotiations is people just start, they're like, okay, this far and no further. This is the line. We're not going to move $250, right? So we have that come up. And one of the things that I will tell you is just keep everybody in play for the emotions to settle. And most of the time we're going to come up with a solution once people have gotten some time to think about it and to come off of that emotion or to come off of that line and say, hey, no problem. Yeah, I understand. Let me talk to them and we'll get back with you. And usually I'm giving it some time for it to settle.
Yeah, that agent could have done a disservice to his client. Like if he had given you that ultimatum and you just said, all right, well, I guess there's nothing we can do, and you had terminated, Well, that property had already been on the market for like 60 days before your client was under contract. So they could have, what if they just went back to market and never sold it?
Right.
So, I mean, you got to be careful what you say. I mean, you're dealing with people's lives. Like, this is their home that they're trying to sell, and they're entrusting you to do it. The things you say have consequences.
Yeah.
So you need to think about what you're saying before you just mouth off that this ultimatum at another agent, because it could put your clients in a big bind.
That's exactly right. Don't let your ego get in the way of helping your clients get where they need to get.
Yeah.
Right. It's just a very good point.
Just another reason why you need to use professionals.
Yeah.
You need to be good at your job, because again, you're dealing with the largest purchases of your client's life.
Well, right. And by the time we sometimes get into these, whether that's in the initial part of it. So think about in this initial where we're just writing the offer. How many houses have we looked at? This is where they want to be. This is the school system they want to be in, so on and so forth. So, again, there's already a lot they have emotionally invested. And then especially when we get into the deal, if we have an appraisal, it's like they're already packing up moving trucks and stuff. So, yeah, again, just don't let your ego get in the way of helping them get where they need to get, because in the long run, like that appraisal, it'll be forgotten about in a month, and everybody will have moved on, and the sellers will have taken their equity and put it in their new house, and the buyers are going to be there, and they're going to be happy, and they're going to be meeting the neighbors, and it's going to be forgotten about. So don't let that one instance determine, the success or failure of your deal. The last thing that I will say, though, is, and this is something that you reminded me of while we were in this deal, is just getting the paperwork right. You're like, hey, just as a friend, you're like, hey, just something to be paying attention to. Here's the deadline on this. Make sure we kind of have our nose clean on it. And I was thinking, yeah, that is really important to exhibit your professionalism through the way that you do paperwork. And if you're not good at paperwork, get somebody with you that is. Like, get a TC or somebody that can kind of help you. Because again, it's going to keep you safe in deals, especially when things get tense. But also, especially at the top end of the deal, if you're putting the deal together and the paperwork's coming through and it's clean and you followed all the instructions and you've got the disclosures in there and you've got all that stuff and it's together and you've got a letter from from the lender, that's going to look so much better to that agent and to the seller and make them so much more confident about your clients as buyers or sellers if you're doing the paperwork the right way. So,
yeah. I mean, you never know. More often than not, somebody's not going to come to you about a deadline and say like, hey, I've got you now. Like, you're forced to buy it, but they could. And so, make sure that you know all the deadlines. Make sure you know when stuff has to be put in to make sure contingencies can be, you can have an out still. Because, somebody could use it against you, and it would be a big mistake on your part.
Yeah. Any final words from you? The thing that I will just say is, like, just continue, we've been saying this a lot. Continue to raise your level of professionalism. Continue to raise your level of expertise as we sort of navigate this changing market, because that's what's going to be separated as the professionals from the amateurs. Consider coming to Six Figure Real Estate School. We have somebody that was in class today, just got their first listing while in school through following some of our methods and tactics. And make sure you take some time to like and subscribe. All of this stuff will be in the show notes. Thank you guys for joining us each week. We will see you next week. Bye.